Hello, I'm Mario Anderson, and welcome to In Focus Kentucky, where we take a look at issues that matter to you right here in the Bluegrass State, and we'll talk to the lawmakers, community organizers, and people like you who help shape those policies. Today, we're focusing on the controversial new pension reform law in Kentucky. In April, Governor Matt Bevin signed Senate Bill 151 into law, in which new teacher hires will have to enter a hybrid cash balance plan instead of having a traditional pension system. The bill would also limit new sick days that teachers can put toward their retirement. In an attempt to overturn the bill, Kentucky Attorney General Andy Beshear filed suit against the law, and he recently provided an update on the proceedings.
So we moved for what's called a protective order to prevent the governor from delaying the action and taking those depositions, and this morning the court granted it. Just another positive step towards getting you the full and final ruling declaring this bill unconstitutional and protecting your rights.
Joining me now is Daniel DeVerscher, political reporter for the Lexington Herald-Leader. Thanks so much for joining us here on In Focus Kentucky.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. Now talk with us about where we are currently with this pension law reform. You've obviously covered it from the beginning in the early debate during the session. So talk to us about where we are as of now.
So right now the pension law is in court. Andy Beshear filed lawsuit shortly after the governor signed it, and it got sent over to the Franklin Circuit Court. And so there's been a lot of little procedural things that have gone on in that process as the Bevin administration has tried to defend it. First, they tried to get Andy Beshear removed from the case because they said he had given advice to the legislature when he said that he would sue over the pension bill because he thought it violated the inviolable contract. And then just yesterday, Franklin Circuit Court Judge Philip Shepard dismissed a motion that would have allowed the Bevin attorneys to depose Andy Beshear and the two other members of the lawsuit, which is the Kentucky Education Association and the Kentucky Fraternal Order of Police. And so that resulted in the governor going on the radio this morning in Cincinnati, and he called the judge in the case an incompetent hack. It's not the first time that he's called Judge Shepard a hack, but it is the latest time that he has said that.
Now, what was the initial reason for Attorney General Beshear's lawsuit, wanting to file that lawsuit?
So there were two main arguments. The first argument is that he says the lawsuit violates the inviolable contract. And the inviolable contract is this portion of the law that says that the legislature can't touch retirement benefits for state employees. And there's question about how far that law goes, whether or not it affects sick days, whether or not it affects simply just the benefits of current retirees. And so Beshear says this violates it, and the Bevin administration and the legislature obviously say it doesn't. The second thing is there was a law that said that any type of change to retirement benefits would have to include an actuarial analysis when it was passed out of committee. And the House committee did not have an actuarial analysis on this bill when they passed it out. And that, Andy Beshear said, broke the law.
Now, you spent a lot of time in Frankfort during this session, the entire time you were up there. Talk with us about these rallies, something that we haven't seen in quite some time, of regular, daily conversations from both sides. Talk about your experience covering that down in Frankfort.
Yeah, so it was kind of a constant presence in some ways, right? So there was, at the beginning, when just the proposal came out, when they were talking about having a special session, so like that was last summer, there were a lot of people wearing red, and it was teachers and public employees. And then as the session went on and it seemed to shift more to affect teachers than it affected other state retirees and employees, it became more teachers that were in the Capitol. And each time that a bill was heard in committee or whatever, the committee rooms were packed and people were chanting. And then as it started to slip away and it seemed like it might not pass, there were still people there, but it got a little less. And then all of a sudden it just burst at the end of the session. And that's when you saw the thousands of teachers descending on Frankfort. I remember there was one day our little bureau is underneath the Senate in the Capitol, and I had to get over to the House, and just getting through was very difficult. I had to like part the Red Sea basically in order to get over to where I needed to be at that time.
Now, do you think with the literally thousands of people that were making their way into Frankfort, that have any effect on some of the procedures or the committee meetings, just that presence of having supporters and educators there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly mattered, right? It's always a statement when you have that much of a visible presence in the Capitol. I think the thing that mattered more was the people back home in the districts of the lawmakers who were expressing their disappointment, because I think that that's what resonates with them a little bit more. And so when they were going back to their district and they were getting grief from some of the teachers and the people who, you know, their next door neighbors, the people who voted for them, I think that probably had the bigger say in kind of dialing back the type of pension reform that they wanted to achieve originally.
And as we move closer to the primary elections in a couple of weeks and then the general elections in November, obviously there was a very well-known phrase that the educators were chanting that we'll remember in November. You're on the front lines and have covered this day in and day out. Do you see a possible change based off of these types of rallies?
I certainly think that it's possible. Prediction, I guess, is the lowest form of journalism. That's the phrase that I like to use a lot. And so I can't say I know, but I think it'll be interesting to see. One of the things that I'm watching is in the primary, House Majority Leader Jonathan Schell. He is running against a teacher in a primary. And I think that that might be somewhat of an indication of whether or not this teacher message will have an impact, and whether or not how far it will go. Because if the House Majority Leader is unseated in a primary, that would mean, oh, this teacher thing's real. I think no matter what, there's going to be somewhat of a challenge for Republicans this year in the State House race. They definitely benefited from President Trump being at the top of the ticket in 2016, and so they're already playing defense a little bit. And so it'll be interesting to see which districts might or might not turn, and whether or not this, I mean, it's almost like a labor movement, right? It's this teacher labor movement, whether or not that has an effect in places like Eastern Kentucky that has a long labor history.
And there obviously is a lot of discussion about future educators and what this new pension law would mean for them. And I know you recently wrote an article about future teachers are going to have to work a lot longer to become eligible for retirement benefits. So talk about that in your article that you've written. So
yeah, I mean, the changes that are made in this pension law mostly apply to future teachers. Those are the people who aren't in Frankfort lobbying because they don't exist yet. And so, yeah, they're going to have to work a little bit longer. Right now there's this rule of 87 where your years of service and your age have to add up to 87 and then you can retire. And instead it's going to do away with that, and you're going to be, you can retire when you're 65 or get full benefits when you're 65. But more importantly, I think, is the actual retirement package. And they flipped people over from a defined benefit system, from having a pension to a hybrid cash balance plan. And that's kind of a mix between a 401k and a defined benefit system, because they guarantee that you get something, right? So there's no loss in this hybrid cash balance plan. But it also varies how much you get based on how well the market performs. And so in theory, that's a little bit less generous than a retirement, than a pension package. And so when the teachers were protesting after the bill passed, it was kind of this message of, well, if you're not giving people as good of retirement benefits, you're going to have a hard time recruiting teachers in the same way that you used to recruit them before. And so it'll be somewhat of a question to see, okay, will Kentucky still be able to recruit teachers? And what will that look like under this new retirement plan?
Well, Daniel, we really appreciate you taking time to talk with us through this pension law reform and where we are, and talking about your work covering it during this previous legislative session.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, coming up, we'll discuss the new pension bill with the president of the Fayette County Educators Association next on In Focus Kentucky.